people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
De la noche, Stephanie Piñeiro.
That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this, our recap of this past Thursday's super lightweight fight between Jessica Camara of Canada and short notice opponent from Mexico,
Carla Zamora, who took the fight on short notice after Priska Vicot, who Jessica was originally supposed to be fighting.
There was some kind of issue ahead of the fight between the two teams, between Team Camara and Team Vicot. Vicot dropped out, Zamora stepped in.
In hindsight, Jessica would have been a lot better off smoothing things over with Priska Vicot than taking on Carla, because you see what happened. A fourth-round TKO stoppage.
Ahead of the match, when that news broke, I anticipated that Carla might actually be a little bit more difficult than Priska, because Carla knocked out Priska some years ago, but I didn't think she was going to go in there and stop Jessica.
Didn't expect that.
Heartbreaking to watch. Let's talk about what we saw in the first round. It became quite evident early on that Jessica was going to have her hands full with Carla Zamora, who came forward throwing punches in bunches, and you can see that there was power on those shots, even if they were uncoordinated wild flurries.
In the first round, you saw who was the bigger puncher of the two.
I gave the first round to Carla Zamora off activity. I gave the second and third rounds to Jessica Camara, who got back in the fight, albeit briefly.
She stunned Carla Zamora a couple of times in rounds 2 and 3.
And for what it's worth, I do think Jessica Camara is the better technical boxer of the two, but this fight and its outcome, it boiled down to intangibles, that while Jessica might be a better boxer, technically a better boxer than Carla Zamora, she's not a better physical specimen. She's not as tough and not as heavy-handed.
Not as durable.
You caught a glimpse of that in the very first round.
All those flurries.
Jessica was flustered, regained her composure in the second round, creating distance, creating space, and walking Carla Zamora into punches. She even hurt Carla.
In the second and third rounds, you saw Jessica getting off good, clean, and clear shots.
Short hooks mid-range to inside as Carla Zamora barreled forward, as Jessica was keeping distance, creating space in order to have room to throw.
Carla didn't want to give her any.
As stated, rounds 2 and 3, you saw Jessica landing some hard shots. She even hurt Carla Zamora, but was unable to finish her. And in round 4,
Carla turned the tide.
I believe it was a big right hand that stunned Jessica Camara, sent her reeling into the ropes. And as she was visibly rattled, visibly hurt, Carla Zamora poured it on thick. Jessica Camara, she stopped throwing, started surviving.
Shelled up and stopped fighting.
She stopped throwing. Carla Zamora, sensing the end was near, poured it on thick. Salvos of punches, waves.
It was hard to watch.
Because I like Jessica Camara, and I admired the progress that she'd made, having dropped that decision in late 2021 to then unified super lightweight champion Kaylee Reese. Controversial decision, tight fight.
That was in late 2021. 2022, Jessica rebounded off that loss, racking up 2 decision wins.
She was picking up steam, gaining momentum. She was on the right track, and then she bumps into Carla Zamora, a short notice opponent.
And the rest is history.
Even though it ended in a 4th round knockout, I wouldn't mind seeing Jessica and Carla run it back, because I happen to think Jessica's a lot better than what she showed this past Thursday.
She'd spent all this time preparing for Priska Vicot, you understand.
Not the woman that knocked her out. One thing leads to another. Priska drops out and Carla steps in. Surely you can see how that might affect the fighter.
The sinister grin on Carla Zamora's face as she rained blows down upon Jessica.
This is a very big win for Carla Zamora.
And as stated, I wouldn't mind seeing them run it back.
I saw Carla Zamora holding a version of the IBF title post-fight, even though it's not registered on BoxRec, so I'm going to assume that this allows Carla Zamora to take a step in the direction of this division's undisputed champion, Chantel Camara, who's supposed to be fighting Katie Taylor very soon.
Obviously, she's busy, and that could turn out to be 2 fights. 2 fights with Katie, if Chantel pulls the upset.
So, you know, While those two undisputed champions are settling up with each other, I really wouldn't mind seeing these two ladies run it back. I think Jessica Camara is better than what she showed this past Thursday, and I'd like to see her get the opportunity to prove it. We then move on to the main event of that same card, Jean Pascal on his lopsided loss to Michael Eiffert. I landed the best shots. I don't understand this decision.
I do.
And I noticed it in the first round that Jean Pascal's timing, sharpness, and explosivity seemed off. Seemed like he was giving Michael Eiffert, who's not a big puncher, seemed like he was giving him a lot of respect.
Perhaps Father Time finally caught up to him.
Usually, a visiting fighter feels he was mistreated on the scorecards in an opponent's hometown. Jean Pascal, however, believes that the judges gave Germany's Michael Eiffert entirely too much credit for his work during their 12th round, 175-pound fight Thursday night in Pascal's adopted hometown of Laval, Quebec, Canada. Pascal was a 7-1 favorite, yet Eiffert outboxed him and won the IBF Eliminator match by large margins on 2 of the 3 judges' scorecards.
All 3 judges scored it for Michael Eiffert.
David Braslow scored it 117 to 111. Pasquale Procopio scored it 118 to 110. And Judge Anthony Paolillo, he scored it 115-113 for Eiffert. Though all the same, anybody that saw this match saw Jean Pascal lost.
It wasn't hard to see that.
He looked old and offbeat. It's always different in Quebec, Pascal said, according to the Montreal Gazette. Normally, the local boxer gets the benefit of the doubt, but that wasn't the case Thursday night. I landed the best shots. I don't understand this decision. At 118-110, does that mean I only won 2 rounds? Then he pressed the action at times. The 40-year-old Pascal landed flush punches only sporadically. He also had difficulty dealing with Eiffert's jab and movement.
You often hear it said that a boxer's power is the last thing to go, and in many instances, his legs are the first. That appeared to be the case with Jean Pascal,
who had bursts of aggression in spots, but he wasn't consistent. Michael Eiffert became the IBF's mandatory challenger for one of the 3 light heavyweight titles owned by Montreal-based Russian knockout artist Artur Beterbiev. Pascal, a former WBC light heavyweight champion, said afterwards that he will take some time to assess what he's going to do next.
he looked old.
It's really not a mystery. At 40 years old, Jean Pascal is not the same explosive puncher that he once was years ago.
That's how it is sometimes. Fighters get old overnight.
I see it all the time. Now, I don't know if COVID affected me, but I was in good shape, Pascal said. Even after the fight, I still had energy. If you think I looked 40, at least I think I looked like a good 40. I'm the one who gave the better shots. I was forcing the fight, pushing him. I don't understand the decision. I was never in danger. Pascal's trainer,
He was in spots, but he wasn't consistent.
he'd explode on the guy, get a couple of punches in there, but it wasn't consistent enough that you could have given him the majority of the rounds.
No way.
Orlando Cuellar was much more critical than Pascal of the judges' scorecards. Eifert threw shots, but most of them landed on the gloves, Cuellar said. I don't see the scores being accurate. I thought Pascal landed the harder shots. He felt Pascal's power. Pascal did great body work. The other kid landed some shots, but missed a lot. It all depends on what the judges like.
The best way to describe how Jean Pascal looked opposite the ring Michael Eiffert was old.
He looked old and offbeat. His salvos of punches, when he was letting punches go, it was labored.
He wasn't all that accurate either. Yeah, he got through with a couple of good body shots here and there, but he tried for a lot of overhand rights, looping shots that missed by a mile.
And perhaps the Jean Pascal of old would have been able to dispatch today's Michael Eiffert, because Michael, God bless him, he's a decent little boxer, but he ain't big on power.
Even worse is, while that guy's not big on power, there were a couple of moments where it looked a lot like he rattled Jean Pascal's cage, where it looked like he buzzed him. It's either Jean Pascal was off balance,
Either he was knocked off balance by those punches or he was stunned by them. From the outside looking in, it's all the same. Looked like Michael Eiffert was getting off.
Michael Eiffert seemed the faster fighter of the two, the sharper fighter of the two, with the fresher set of legs, and that made all the difference.
Forcing the older fighter to have to catch up to you, forcing the older fighter to have to close the distance, it wears on them a lot worse.
Because they're old.
You're not going to have the same sharpness, the same explosivity, fast twitch muscles, reflexes, and response time. These are things that gradually decay over time.
Natural decay of time. It catches up to us all. It looks like it caught up to Jean Pascal this past Thursday.
Just like that, Reigning unified light heavyweight champion Artur Beterbiev has yet another mandatory challenger in the queue en route to satisfying another one.
He satisfied his WBO mandatory challenger in Anthony Yard. He's supposed to be fighting his WBC mandatory challenger in Callum Smith.
And if he beats that guy and stays unified champion, he will have Michael Eiffert to contend with. Artur Beterbiev, not being the youngest fighter, the youngest champion, you know he's in Jean Pascal's age bracket.
It's not too far off.
Artur Beterbiev is in his late 30s. He's one of these guys to where you have to watch him because Father Time could show up at any minute and suddenly he gets old overnight.
It's just a question of when. Most people would pick him to beat Callum Smith. I'm picking him to beat Callum Smith if they do fight.
If they fight, but banking on a fighter his age, you know, it's always a gamble.
So you know. Congratulations to Michael Eiffert, who was a 7-1 underdog.
This is the biggest victory of his career so far, beating a former champion on the road in a fight that he was favored to lose.
He was.
Becoming the IBF's mandatory challenger. Congratulations to him. And finally, in men's heavyweight news, disappointing developments by way of Klimas, who handles the career of Alexander Usyk, stating, "The deeper we go, the more chance to pull out the plug. Sorry to our fans."
If it were announced tomorrow that the undisputed heavyweight title fight isn't happening, I wouldn't be at all surprised.
All manner of mental gymnastics are often used to exonerate Tyson Fury of culpability for being a very difficult guy.
An asshole.
So much so that you start to wonder if Tyson Fury's fans are boxing fans at all, because here we have two champions, the last two men standing in the men's heavyweight division, and I'm expected to believe that if this fight collapses, it's Usyk's fault.
Usyk that never has any problems negotiating a deal, making a fight.
The Usyk people, they don't waste any time. Usyk's manager already said that if the Fury fight does not happen on April 29th, Usyk will pursue his mandatory challenger, and the next one in the rotation is Daniel Dubois, another one of Frank Warren's boys.
Promoted by Queensberry.
Who Tyson Fury goes on to fight if this fight collapses, I don't know, but it's crystal clear what the Usyk people mean to do. If this fight is not going to happen, it will only happen on April 29th, Klimas told journalist Steve Kim. Or it's just going to be cancelled, and we'll go with a mandatory. Eager's remarks would appear to pour water over recent declarations from Fury and his promoter that the fight is on track to happen as originally planned.
Well, of course they're making those declarations. They want to save face. They don't want to take the heat for this.
The fight is happening. What can I say? It's happening, boys. It's happening, and that's it. Don't worry. Who cares what Tony Bellin says? I mean, who gives a toss? It's insignificant. These guys are the best. These are Hall of Famers, future Hall of Famer fighters. These are great fighters.
Just feels like Frank Warren is trying his best to sell it in order to save face, while Klimas tells another story. It's changed. Top Rank got more involved in it, but not too much, Klimas said of negotiations. They're still treating Alexander Usyk like they did with previous Fury opponents, Derek Chisora or Dillian White. They act like it's just a regular Fury fight in the UK, and everything has to be by Fury's rules.
That's the gist of it.
A seemingly fed-up Klimas also pointed out that negotiations may take even longer now that they are pursuing legal counsel in the UK in an attempt to bolster their standing at the negotiation table. We're going to wait because right now we're in the process of hiring British counsel because they, Team Fury, are going by British rules, Klimas said. We are the outsiders, but we can't just play.
Don't forget that this fight was supposed to happen on neutral territory, neutral ground, for way more money than they stand to make in the United Kingdom.
And don't forget whose side of it is reported to have moved the fight from Saudi over to the United Kingdom, only so you could start talking about money. If it were really about money, you would have kept it in Saudi.
Don't forget
that Alexander Usyk, according to Bob Arum himself, already accepted his end of the deal in Saudi.
Don't forget.
We're not accustomed to seeing this when it comes to a set of negotiations involving Team Usyk, but we are more than accustomed to seeing this when it comes to Team Fury.
You think I give a rat's ass about Alexander Usyk's bank account and how much money he stands to make? I don't.
I don't care what this guy makes for a fight. I care about the fight actually happening and reasonable terms.
Reasonable enough that both teams can agree to a deal, but the way the Fury people are playing this...
I remember earlier this week that the Usyk people specified Friday would be the deadline for the fight as to whether or not they were going to move forward. Friday has come and gone.
There's been no official announcement, no official fight poster.
You see what Klimas is saying?
You see where we are.
All of those assertions from Tyson Fury, all of those assertions from his promoter, Frank Warren.
But you see where we are.
So let's get down to brass tacks. I can care less about what sophisticated and elaborate explanations Tyson Fury's fanboys might have if and when this fight collapses. I don't care.
I don't want to hear that. I want to see a fight.
And based on what I'm looking at, it's hard to make a fight when you're negotiating with someone like Tyson Fury.
The guy who bailed on the Klitschko rematch?
I never bought that bit about his injured ankle or any of that crap.
The guy who in between the first Wilder fight and the second Wilder fight went ahead and involved Top Rank into the situation, complicating things, thereby delaying the second Deontay Wilder fight and ahead of the third. They had to get an arbitrator to get this guy in the ring because him and his promoter were running around telling everybody that they weren't going to fight Deontay Wilder for a third time, that they were going to go into a Joshua fight. They don't go into a Joshua fight. They end up fighting Deontay Wilder for a third time after saying that would never happen.
And what about the more recent set of quote-unquote negotiations for a Joshua fight? All of those imposed deadlines and time constraints.
All of that came from Tyson Fury.
And all of the issues this current set of negotiations is facing.
All of that came from Tyson Fury.
So if you want to die on a hill defending this putz, for whatever reason you're so enamored with him, you do that.
Go ahead.
The majority of fight fans are still going to blame Tyson Fury should this fight collapse. And if you don't believe me, take a poll on your Twitter, on your YouTube, your Facebook.
Go ahead.
The bubble that Tyson Fury's cult of followers lives in is shrinking. This fight falls apart.
Most people are going to blame him.
Irrespective of your elaborate arguments and mental gymnastics. Usyk is not otherwise associated with these kinds of issues in order to make a fight. And right now, this is the only fight to make in the men's heavyweight division.
But the way you guys are playing it, how are you supposed to agree to a deal? How are you supposed to come to terms when you're playing it the way you're playing it?
Wouldn't be at all surprised to hear tomorrow that the fight is off, and the two remaining champions in the men's heavyweight division go their separate ways. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see...
Surprised to hear that Usyk versus Dubois is next.
Because I've always questioned Tyson Fury's commitment towards making this fight. I've questioned it from the very beginning, and if it falls apart...
Usyk already accepted your 70-30 split.
And after he accepts it, you pop up with this bit about the rematch clause, or there being no rematch clause, when what I'm thinking to myself... If this was a part of the initial agreement from the very beginning, why do you now wish to change it?
If this is what it was up until this point, why are you making alterations?
It's almost like you're deliberately being difficult so that these guys walk away. So they finally say they've had enough and they're not going to let you waste any more of their time. So when they do, you can wrap this around their necks and blame them.
That's what I see.
Yeah, Tyson Fury can box a bit, but that doesn't mean he's not a con man.
Two things can be true at the same time.
And when it comes to him, I think they are. Especially when it comes to him, because this is pattern behavior.
Tell the mage.
And unfortunately, it's expected.